I never thought I'd be one of those people with a story like this. You know, the kind you read late at night on Reddit and wonder how the hell someone's life could fall apart so spectacularly. But here I am, sitting in the guest room of my own home, with a hollow feeling in my chest and a USB drive I wish I'd never touched. For context, my wife, Lisa, and I have been married for 8 years. She's always been spirited. Quick to anger, sure, but also quick to laugh. She has this way of lighting up a room, and I used to think it was just for me. Lately, though, things had felt off. I chalked it up to the usual ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. Busy schedules. Stress. The usual. I left for a business trip last week, nothing out of the ordinary. The plan was to be gone for 4 days, attend a few conferences, shake hands, and schmooze. The night before I left, Lisa was unusually quiet. I thought she was just annoyed because I hadn't cleaned out the garage like I promised. She barely kissed me goodbye the next morning. I remember telling myself, make it up to her when you get back. Maybe a nice dinner or something. But life had other plans. On the second day of the trip, a colleague, Mark, called in a panic. He'd left his USB drive in my car when I gave him a ride to the airport. He was frantic, saying he needed some files for a presentation. He asked if I could plug it in and email the necessary documents. I didn't think twice. It seemed harmless enough. I plugged the drive into my laptop, found the folder labeled Presentations, and attached the files he needed. But as I was about to eject the drive, a folder caught my eye: home footage. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd expect from Mark, a guy who spent half his life buried in spreadsheets. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, thinking maybe he'd recorded something funny or interesting. Instead, I saw a thumbnail that made my stomach drop. The video was unmistakably recorded from across the street, outside my house. And what I saw next shattered everything I thought I knew. My hand hovered over the mouse, every instinct screaming at me to close the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen it. But something darker, a mix of dread and suspicion, pushed me to click play. The video started shaky, like whoever was holding the camera was nervous. But there it was, the unmistakable sight of my house, our front porch bathed in the soft glow of the evening light. My wife stepped out, wearing that red dress she always said made her feel confident. The one I bought her for our anniversary last year. I froze. At first, I thought maybe it was just a candid shot Mark had taken during some neighborhood gathering. Maybe he wanted to show off his camera or something. But then another figure entered the frame. A man I didn't recognize. He wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't a friend. Hell, he wasn't even wearing the kind of stiff business casual that would have made me think he was someone delivering a package. No, this man was comfortable. Too comfortable. And then it happened. Lisa looked up at him, her face breaking into a smile I hadn't seen in weeks. That carefree, radiant grin that used to be mine. She stepped closer to him, wrapping her arms around his neck as he leaned down to kiss her. I paused the video. My breath caught in my throat as the realization began to sink in. This wasn't some innocent mistake. This wasn't something I could wave away with excuses or misunderstandings. I pressed play again, unable to stop myself from watching. They lingered on the porch for a moment, talking, laughing softly, before she led him inside. My house. Our house. The door shut behind them, and the video ended. I sat there, staring at the screen. The silence in the room was deafening, save for the faint hum of the laptop fan. My mind was a chaotic mess of denial, anger, and despair. How long had this been going on? Who was this guy? And why the hell did Mark have this footage? I leaned back in the chair, the weight of everything pressing down on me. It felt like I was suffocating. Part of me wanted to call Lisa right then and there, demand an explanation, and let her lie her way out of it like I knew she would. Instead, I stared at the USB drive, realizing this was only the beginning. I couldn't sit still. My hands were shaking as I ejected the USB and tossed it onto the desk like it was a ticking time bomb. Every rational part of me screamed to take a step back, cool down, and think this through. But I couldn't. I couldn't let it go. I paced the room, my mind racing. There was no context. No timeline. Just a 10-second clip of my wife kissing a man and leading him into our house. But I knew Lisa. She wasn't careless. She wouldn't have done this on a whim. This had to mean something. I told myself I needed more proof. Maybe Mark's USB had something else on it. Another video. A text log. Something that could explain why he had this footage at all. I grabbed the USB and plugged it back in. My heart pounded as I opened the folder again. There were other files, more videos, all labeled with timestamps and dates. The most recent was from just 3 days ago. While I was gone. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. The same scene. My house. Different day. It was daytime this time, and the man, this stranger, was wearing a casual hoodie and jeans. Lisa was in her yoga outfit, the one she always wore when she was too busy to make dinner. They kissed again, this time quickly, before stepping inside. The video wasn't shaky this time. It was deliberate. Someone had taken the time to record this as if they wanted me to find it. That's when it hit me, Mark knew. He must have known. I closed the video and scrolled through the remaining files, looking for anything else. But there was nothing new, just the same gut-wrenching shots of her with him, different days, different outfits, but the same story. I couldn't sit there anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mark's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, did you get the files I needed?" he asked, his tone casual, oblivious. I clenched my teeth. "Yeah, Mark, I did. But I also found something else on your USB." The line went silent for a moment. Then he let out a long sigh. "I was hoping you wouldn't look at those." My grip tightened on the phone. "What the hell is this, Mark? Why do you have videos of my house? Of Lisa? Who's the guy?" I wasn't sure how to tell you," he stammered. "I live a few streets over. I go jogging near your place sometimes. A couple weeks ago, I saw her on the porch with that guy. It didn't sit right with me, so I started keeping an eye out. I wasn't trying to pry, man, but I thought you should know." I didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. "So you decided to play neighborhood PI instead of just telling me? How long has this been going on?" Mark hesitated. "I don't know for sure. The first time I saw them was about a month ago. I thought it was a one-off, but then I saw him again. And again. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed. A month. Maybe longer. Every memory I had of Lisa in that time, every smile, every kiss, felt tainted." "I thought you deserved the truth," Mark added, his voice softer. I'm sorry, man. I hung up without saying another word. There was nothing left to say. The truth was staring me in the face, and it was uglier than I ever could have imagined. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, unable to process the avalanche of emotions crashing over me. My mind kept replaying the video, the image of Lisa kissing that man etched into my thoughts like a permanent scar. The weight of it all pressed down on my chest, leaving me gasping for air. I had to do something, but I felt paralyzed. Mark's words echoed in my head, "I thought you deserved the truth." Did I? Because the truth didn't feel like justice, it felt like a cruel twist, ripping apart everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my wife. And then my phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. It was a text from Lisa. "Lisa, miss you. Hope your trip's going well. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." The sight of her words made my stomach turn. Miss me? How could she type those words so casually, as if she wasn't ripping my heart out behind my back? My thumb hovered over the keyboard, itching to send a reply that matched the rage building inside me. But I stopped. No. Not yet. I needed more time. More clarity. More control. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to respond with the calm she expected. Miss you too. Can't wait." It felt like a betrayal to myself, typing those words. But I needed to think. I needed to act, not react. For the next hour, I went through everything on that USB drive. Each file chipped away at whatever denial I had left. The timestamps on the videos painted a damning timeline. He'd been to the house multiple times over the past month, on days I worked late, on weekends when Lisa claimed she was running errands, and even 3 days ago, while I was out of town. The realization made me sick to my stomach. She wasn't even cautious anymore. She thought I'd never find out. But now I knew. And I had proof. Anger surged through me, hot and overwhelming. She'd brought a stranger into our home, our sanctuary, and desecrated it. Everything I thought we had together, trust, love, loyalty, was a lie. But I couldn't afford to act impulsively. I grabbed a notebook from my bag and started writing down every detail I could remember, dates, times, what Mark had told me, and the evidence from the videos. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be ready. I couldn't give her room to twist the narrative or gaslight me. The sun had started to set by the time I put the pen down. The shadows in the room grew longer, but inside me, the fire only burned brighter. Lisa thought she was safe, that her betrayal would never come to light. She was wrong. The next morning, I packed up my things and drove home. The closer I got, the heavier my chest felt, as if every mile was piling bricks on top of me. Part of me wanted to turn around, check into a hotel, and avoid what was waiting for me at the end of this road. But the other part, the one fueled by anger and the need for answers, kept me going. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did, quiet, welcoming. Deceptive. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the front door as though it might give me the courage I needed. Lisa opened the door before I could even step out. Her smile was wide, her hair pulled back, her eyes sparkling the way they always did when she was excited to see me. She looked perfect. It felt like a slap in the face. "Welcome home," she chirped, running down the steps to hug me. I let her hug me, but I didn't respond. My arms hung limp at my sides as her perfume, a scent I once loved, now made my stomach churn. She pulled back, her brow furrowing. "Everything okay?" she asked. I forced a smile, the same kind of fake grin I'd perfected in the past 48 hours. "Yeah, just tired. Long drive." She nodded, buying the excuse. "Come on inside. I made breakfast." The house smelled like coffee and pancakes, and the table was set with the kind of effort she usually only made on special occasions. Was this guilt? An apology without words? Or was it just her pretending everything was fine, hoping I wouldn't notice the cracks in her facade? We sat down, and she started talking about her week, filling the air with meaningless chatter about errands and neighbors and TV shows. I nodded and grunted in the right places, my mind elsewhere. I kept glancing at her, searching for some sign of guilt, but she was a master of composure. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her act. When she finally paused to sip her coffee, she asked, "So, how was the trip?" I froze for half a second before answering. "Fine. Busy. Got a lot done." She smiled and reached across the table to touch my hand. "I'm glad you're back. It's always lonely when you're gone." I almost laughed. Lonely? That was her excuse? But I swallowed the retort and forced another smile. "I missed you too." It was a lie, but it was necessary. I needed to figure out my next move. I couldn't confront her yet, not without more clarity, not without knowing how far this had gone. For now, I had to play the part. The breakfast dragged on, and I couldn't stop glancing at her hands, her face, her lips. I'd kissed those lips. I'd held those hands. How could they have betrayed me so easily? I needed to breathe. To think. "I'm going to unpack," I said, standing abruptly. "Do you need help?" she asked, her voice sweet, concerned. "No, I got it," I said, forcing a smile. "Why don't you relax? You've done enough." As I headed to the bedroom, I heard her humming to herself in the kitchen. The sound grated against my ears. I shut the door and sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at my suitcase. The game had begun. I just hoped I had the strength to finish it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I busied myself with unpacking, cleaning up loose papers from my work bag, and generally avoiding Lisa as much as I could without making it obvious. Every time I caught her humming in the kitchen or saw her curled up on the couch scrolling through her phone, I felt my anger simmering just below the surface. I couldn't keep it bottled up much longer. After dinner, I sat down with her in the living room, forcing myself to act casual. The TV was playing in the background, some reality show she loved. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and I could barely stand it. "Lisa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She murmured, not looking up from her phone. "There's something I need to ask you." That got her attention. She sat up, her face instantly shifting to a mask of mild concern. "What's up? Is something wrong?" I hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Has anyone been by the house while I was gone?" Her eyebrows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Anyone. Friends, neighbors, anyone." She shook her head. "No, why? Did someone say something?" I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of guilt, but her expression remained calm. Too calm. "No one said anything," I lied. "I just thought I noticed something out of place when I got home." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Like what?" I scrambled for an answer. The porch light. It was on when I got back, but I'm pretty sure I turned it off before I left. Lisa laughed, the sound high and light. Babe, you're probably just tired from the trip. I've been careful about keeping things locked up and turning off the lights. You know me. I did know her. And I knew that every word out of her mouth right now was a calculated lie. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, you're probably right. She leaned back against the couch, her attention drifting back to the TV. But my mind was racing. She was good, too good at deflecting. And that only confirmed what I already knew. Later that night, when Lisa went to take a shower, I sat down with my laptop and reopened the USB. My hand hovered over the files, debating whether to watch them again or delete them and spare myself the pain. But I couldn't. I needed to know if there was something I'd missed, some clue that would give me the upper hand when I confronted her for real. The videos were the same as before. Her smile. The way she leaned into him. The casual intimacy between them. It made my stomach churn. But this time, I noticed something new, a detail I'd overlooked in my initial rage. In one of the clips, as they walked toward the house, Lisa was holding a shopping bag from a local boutique. One she'd told me she hadn't been to in months. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to prove that this wasn't some fleeting mistake or random encounter. This was deliberate. Calculated. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My pulse pounded in my ears, and my hands curled into fists. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Confronting Lisa outright wasn't going to work, not yet. She was too good at deflecting, too smooth with her lies. If I pushed her without something undeniable, she'd find a way to wriggle out of it. I needed to catch her in the act. At breakfast, she was cheerful again, chatting about her plans for the day. Errands. Maybe some shopping. She even asked if I wanted her to pick anything up for me while she was out. The irony wasn't lost on me. No, I'm good, I said, keeping my tone neutral. What time do you think you'll be back? Probably mid-afternoon, she said, sipping her coffee. Why? I shrugged. Just wondering. Thought I might do some work around the house. She smiled. Sounds good. I'll text you if I'm running late. She left around 10:30, kissing me on the cheek before walking out the door. I watched her drive away, my stomach in knots. It was time. I grabbed the spare car keys from the hook by the door and got into my car, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice me following her. My heart pounded as I tailed her through the neighborhood, out onto the main road, and then toward the shopping district. For a while, it seemed like she might actually be telling the truth. She parked near a boutique and went inside, emerging 10 minutes later with a bag. I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I losing it? Seeing things that weren't there? But then she didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a coffee shop, parked, and sat in her car for a few minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I parked a few spaces away, keeping my head low, and waited. That's when he showed up. The man from the videos. He strolled up to her car like he didn't have a care in the world, leaning down to talk to her through the window. They exchanged a few words before she got out, laughing, and hugged him. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. My heart sank as I watched her hand him the shopping bag, smiling like a woman who didn't have a husband waiting for her at home. They got into his car together and drove off. I hesitated for a moment before following them. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow, but I couldn't stop now. I needed to know. They pulled into the parking lot of a motel on the edge of town. It felt like a punch to the gut. I parked across the street, my mind racing. I grabbed my phone and started recording as they walked into the building together, his arm casually draped over her shoulders. She didn't even look back. It was all the proof I needed. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the motel, my anger simmering just below the surface. I wanted to storm in, confront them right then and there. But I knew better. This wasn't the place or the time. When I finally drove home, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The evidence was undeniable now. There was no way she could talk her way out of this. Tonight, she'd have no choice but to face the truth. Lisa came home later than she'd said she would, her face lighting up with a smile when she walked through the door. She carried a bag from the boutique, one that matched the one she'd handed off to him earlier. My stomach turned at the thought of her trying to cover her tracks so carelessly. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting the bag down on the counter. The store was packed, and I ran into a friend. I nodded, barely looking at her. "It's fine." Her smile faltered. "You okay? You seem off." "Just tired," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Long week." She walked over to me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Maybe we should do something nice this weekend. Just the two of us." The audacity of her suggestion made my blood boil. She thought she could erase what I'd seen with a few sweet words and a cozy weekend together. But I wasn't playing along anymore. "Sounds good," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Let me think about it." She nodded, kissed my cheek, and went off to the bedroom to change. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the bag she'd brought home. For a moment, I considered confronting her right then and there. But I knew I needed to stay calm, to approach this the right way. When she came back, I was waiting in the living room, the USB plugged into my laptop. She looked at me curiously, tilting her head. "What's up?" she asked. I gestured to the couch. "Sit down." Her eyes flickered with something, nervousness, confusion, but she obeyed, sitting down across from me. I opened my laptop, the screen angled toward her, and clicked on the first video. The color drained from her face as soon as the footage started playing. The sound of the porch door closing, her laughter, and the unmistakable image of her kissing him on our doorstep. "Care to explain?" I asked, my voice low and even. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what this is." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it looks pretty clear to me. That's our house. That's you. And that's a guy I've never seen before." Her hands fidgeted in her lap, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. I can explain." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "By all means." "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice shaky. "He's just a friend. We've been catching up. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd get jealous." I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "Jealous? Lisa, he's walking into our house. You're kissing him. That's not jealousy, it's betrayal." She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "No, it's not like that. I swear, it's just, don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice cutting through her excuses. "I followed you today. I saw you meet him. I saw you go to that motel together." Her face crumpled, and the tears started to flow. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen. Please, just let me explain." I stared at her, my heart pounding. The tears didn't move me. The excuses didn't matter. I wanted the truth, every ugly, painful piece of it. "Start talking," I said coldly. "And don't leave anything out." Lisa's tears fell freely now, her hands shaking as she wiped at her cheeks. "It didn't mean anything," she whispered. "I swear, it was just. I don't even know how it started." "Try," I said, my tone icy. She glanced at the laptop, the video still paused on the image of her and the man walking into the house. "It was a few months ago," she began, her voice trembling. "I met him at the gym. We started talking, and it just happened." "Just happened?" I repeated, my anger rising. "You don't just happen to bring someone into your house, Lisa. You don't just happen to go to a motel with them." She flinched at my tone but pressed on. "I was lonely, okay? You've been so busy with work. I felt like we weren't connecting anymore." I stared at her in disbelief. "Lonely? That's your excuse? I've been working my ass off to support us, to build a future for us, and your solution is to screw around behind my back?" "It wasn't like that," she insisted, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't even want it to happen, but he kept showing up, and you couldn't say no?" I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You couldn't stop yourself from inviting him into our home, into our bed?" Her eyes widened. "It never happened in our bed. I swear." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, well, that makes it so much better. Thanks for that, Lisa." She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "Please," she pleaded. "I know I messed up. I'll do anything to fix this." "Fix this?" I snapped. "How do you fix something like this, Lisa? How do you come back from lying to my face for months? From making me feel like a fool while you carried on with him?" She broke down, her sobs shaking her entire body. "I'll end it," she cried. "I'll block his number, I'll never see him again. I'll go to therapy, whatever you want. Just please, don't leave me." I stood up, pacing the room as I tried to process everything. Her words rang hollow, her promises too little, too late. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a calculated betrayal, one that she had maintained for months. I turned to face her, my chest heaving. "I don't know if I can do this, Lisa," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Her sobs grew louder, and she buried her face in her hands. But I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. Not after everything she'd done. "I need space," I said finally. "I can't look at you right now." She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Where are you going?" I grabbed my keys from the counter. "I don't know. But I can't stay here." Without waiting for her response, I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. The cool night air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to calm the storm raging inside me. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, my thoughts spinning in circles. I had no idea what the future held, but one thing was clear: things would never be the same again. I drove for hours, my mind replaying every lie, every excuse, and every kiss I'd seen on those videos. The quiet hum of the road did little to soothe the chaos in my head. I couldn't shake the image of Lisa, sitting there sobbing, begging for another chance. Was it real? Or was it just another act in her twisted performance? I finally pulled into a dimly lit parking lot outside a 24-hour diner. The neon sign buzzed faintly, the letters flickering in and out. It felt fitting, broken, just like me. I walked in, found a booth in the corner, and ordered a coffee I didn't want. The server gave me a sympathetic look but didn't ask any questions. I was grateful for that. The last thing I needed was to explain this mess to a stranger. I pulled out my phone and stared at it, debating whether to call someone. But who? My family would only tell me to leave her. My friends would want details I wasn't ready to share. I felt completely alone. Against my better judgment, I opened my messages and started typing. Me, I can't believe you did this. I trusted you. I hovered over the send button, hesitating. Did I want to hear from her? Did I want to give her another opportunity to lie? My thumb wavered, then hit delete. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, I opened my photo gallery and scrolled through pictures of happier times. Lisa and I on our anniversary trip last year, smiling by the ocean. Her holding the surprise cake I'd made for her birthday. The two of us decorating the Christmas tree, laughing at how terrible we were at hanging lights. It all felt so hollow now. The server came by and refilled my coffee. "Anything else I can get you?" she asked, her voice kind. I shook my head. "No, thanks." As she walked away, I thought about Mark. He'd been the one to uncover all of this, the one who gave me the evidence I needed to confront her. Part of me hated him for it, but a bigger part of me knew I owed him. I pulled up his number and hit call. "Hey," he answered after a few rings, his tone cautious. "You okay?" I laughed bitterly. "Not even close." "I figured," he said. "What happened?" I told him everything, following Lisa, the motel, the confrontation. He listened quietly, letting me vent without interruption. When I finally finished, he let out a long sigh. "I'm sorry, man," he said. "I really am. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I couldn't just do nothing." "I know," I said. "I don't blame you. If anything, I'm grateful." There was a pause before he asked, "What are you going to do?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. What was I going to do? I didn't have an answer. "Not yet." "I don't know," I admitted. "I just need time." Mark didn't push. "If you need anything, let me know." "Thanks," I said, ending the call. I sat there in the diner for a long time, staring out the window at the empty streets. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but now it was joined by something else. A deep, aching sadness. My life, my marriage, everything I thought I knew, it was all a lie. And I had no idea how to move forward. I stayed at the diner until the sun began to rise, casting a pale orange glow over the parking lot. The caffeine hadn't helped, my hands were still trembling, my thoughts still racing. The only thing I'd gained was the realization that there was no easy way out of this. No matter what I did next, it would hurt. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, I felt like a ghost. The house was silent when I walked in. Lisa was still asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, I didn't care. I went to the guest room, shut the door behind me, and sat down at the desk, staring at my laptop. I opened the videos again, forcing myself to watch every second. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. It wasn't just the kisses or the motel. It was the little things, her laugh, the way she touched his arm, the way she looked at him like he was the center of her world. That used to be me. One video stood out, a clip from 2 weeks ago. It was recorded on a weekend when Lisa had told me she was meeting a friend for brunch. In the video, she and the man were sitting on our porch, sipping coffee and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I noticed something then that I hadn't before, her wedding ring. She wasn't wearing it. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. It was one thing to betray me, but to take off the ring, to discard the symbol of everything we'd built together, felt like the ultimate slap in the face. I didn't bother confronting her that morning. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I spent the day gathering more evidence. I scoured her phone records, her emails, her social media, anything that might give me a clearer picture of what was going on. She was meticulous, but not perfect. There were gaps in her stories, inconsistencies that lined up with the videos Mark had given me. By the time she woke up and came downstairs, I was sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open, surrounded by printed screenshots and notes. She froze when she saw me. "Good morning," she said cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, waiting. She took a hesitant step forward. "Did you come home last night?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I did." She bit her lip, her eyes darting to the pile of papers on the table. "What's all this?" "You tell me," I said, my voice cold. Her face paled, and she sank into the chair across from me. I don't know what to say." "Try the truth," I snapped. "That would be a good start." She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers nervously. "I already told you. It was a mistake. I never wanted it to go this far." I leaned forward, my voice sharp. "How far, Lisa? How far did it go? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having a full-blown affair." She flinched at the word. "It wasn't like that," she said weakly. "Then what was it?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it sure as hell looks like you replaced me." Her shoulders shook as she started crying again, but I didn't care. The tears meant nothing to me anymore. They were just another layer of her manipulation, another way to make herself the victim. "Tell me the truth," I said again, my voice low and steady. "All of it. Right now." She took a deep, shuddering breath, and when she looked up at me, her face was pale and drawn. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything." Lisa's hands trembled as she wrung them together, her face streaked with tears. She was silent for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know where to start. Finally, she spoke. "It started a few months ago," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I met him at the gym. He was charming, and he made me feel seen. I don't even know how it happened, but we started talking more, texting, and what?" I snapped, leaning forward. "How did it go from texting to sneaking him into our house?" Her shoulders slumped, and she looked away. I didn't plan it, she said. But he kept showing up, and I felt. I don't know. I felt wanted. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. Wanted? Lisa, I've spent the last 8 years of my life wanting you. Loving you. And this is how you repay me? I know, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I know I screwed up, okay? I never meant for it to go this far. Stop saying that, I snapped. It didn't just happen, Lisa. You made choices. Over and over again, you chose him over me. Her tears fell harder, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't say anything else. But then she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. It wasn't real, she said. I know that doesn't excuse it, but it wasn't real. He doesn't mean anything to me. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Not real? You brought him into our house, Lisa. Our home. You kissed him on our porch. You went to motels with him. That's pretty damn real. I was lonely, she said again, her voice cracking. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like you didn't see me anymore. Busy with work? I shot back. You mean the work that pays our bills? The work that supports us? That gives us this life? She looked down again, unable to meet my gaze. I know it was wrong, she said. I know I hurt you, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll end it with him, I'll go to therapy, I'll do anything. Why should I believe you? I asked coldly. Why should I trust anything you say? Her lips quivered, but she didn't have an answer. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I stood up, pushing the chair back with a screech. I need space, I said. I can't do this right now. Lisa jumped to her feet, her voice panicked. Wait, please. Don't go. We can fix this. I love you. I turned to face her, my heart breaking even as my anger burned. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this, I said quietly. I don't even know who you are anymore. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. The sound of her crying followed me, but I didn't look back. I drove aimlessly again, not knowing where to go. My thoughts were a jumbled mess of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible. And now, I was supposed to believe she could undo it all with a few tears and empty promises? Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a park where Lisa and I used to go on weekends. It was quiet now, the sun casting long shadows over the empty benches and swings. I parked the car and just sat there, staring into the distance, trying to make sense of it all. Her confession kept replaying in my head. Lonely. That was her excuse. That was the justification for everything she had done. But what about me? What about the long hours I worked to give us the life we had? What about the loneliness I felt, too, when she became distant and cold? Did none of that matter? I thought about the man from the videos, his smug face and casual demeanor as he walked into my house. Our house. He didn't look like a fling. He looked comfortable, like he belonged there. That realization hit me harder than anything Lisa had said. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a relationship. A life she had built with someone else, parallel to the one we shared. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Lisa. Lisa, please come home. We need to talk. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I love you. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could I say? What could I do? Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that we could salvage something from the wreckage. But the larger part of me, the part that was still reeling from the betrayal, knew better. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the messages from Mark, scrolling through the evidence he had sent me. The videos, the timestamps, the dates. Each one felt like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. I needed to decide what to do next, but every option felt impossible. I couldn't go back to the house, not yet. I couldn't look at her without seeing him, without hearing her lies echoing in my mind. But I couldn't avoid it forever. Eventually, I would have to face her again, to decide whether we could move forward or if this was the end. And deep down, I already knew the answer. The drive back home was slow and deliberate. I wasn't ready, but I also knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but exhaustion had dulled its edges. I was tired of feeling like a stranger in my own life. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for a faint light in the living room. Lisa was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes widening with a mix of relief and fear. "You're back," she said softly, her voice tentative. I stood in the doorway, the weight of the silence pressing down on us. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. She nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "I know." I walked into the room but didn't sit. I needed the distance. "I've thought a lot about what you said. About everything." Lisa looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring nervously. The sight of it made my chest tighten. The same ring she had taken off for him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, and I don't deserve another chance, but, you're right," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "You don't deserve another chance." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide and glistening. But, I continued, cutting her off again, "this isn't just about what you deserve. It's about what I deserve. And I don't deserve this." Her face crumpled, and she let out a choked sob. "I know. I know you don't. But I love you. I made a mistake, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you let me." I shook my head, my jaw tightening. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Leaving the stove on. This wasn't a mistake, Lisa. This was deliberate. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And you kept doing it, over and over, knowing how much it would destroy me if I found out. She stood up, stepping closer, her hands outstretched as if to touch me. "I can change," she said desperately. "I can prove to you that I'm still the woman you married." I took a step back, shaking my head. The woman I married would have never done this. She wouldn't have lied to me. She wouldn't have let some stranger into our home. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I couldn't. "I don't know what's next," I said, my voice quieter now. "I don't know if we can fix this. But I do know that I can't just forgive you and pretend like nothing happened. That's not fair to me." "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It means I need time," I said. "And space. I can't be here right now." She stared at me, her tears falling silently. "Are you leaving?" I nodded. "For now." Her shoulders slumped, and she sank back onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "Please don't give up on us," she whispered. "Please." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door, my chest aching with every step. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. I stayed with a friend that night, someone who didn't ask questions or try to offer advice. I was grateful for the silence. It gave me the space I desperately needed to think. By the time the sun rose, I felt like I had aged a decade. But I also felt clarity for the first time in days. Lisa had begged me not to give up on us, but the truth was, she had already given up long before I ever knew there was a problem. Her actions had spoken louder than any apology or promise she could make now. And as much as it hurt, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I spent the day gathering documents, printing emails, and organizing the evidence I had collected. It was painful, reliving the betrayal through the videos and messages, but it was necessary. If I was going to walk away, I needed to do it on solid ground. That evening, I went back to the house. Lisa was waiting for me in the kitchen, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked up when I walked in, hope flickering in her expression. "Did you think about what I said?" she asked tentatively. "I did," I said, my voice steady. "And I've made a decision." She stood up, gripping the edge of the counter. "Please, just give me one more chance. We can go to therapy, we can rebuild. I'm filing for divorce," I said, cutting her off. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Her face crumpled, and she let out a wail that echoed through the house. But I didn't waver. I couldn't. "This isn't something we can come back from," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I don't trust you. And without trust, there's no marriage." "I'll change," she sobbed. "I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do." "You had the chance to make better choices," I said, shaking my head. "You didn't. And now, we both have to live with the consequences." She collapsed onto the floor, her sobs racking her body, but I didn't move to comfort her. The man who would have done that, the man who believed in her unconditionally, was gone. I packed a bag that night and left. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what I had lost. Relief for what I had escaped. And a sliver of hope for what might come next. Over the weeks that followed, I leaned on friends and family for support. Some encouraged me to move on quickly, to find someone new and start over. Others told me to take my time, to focus on healing. I didn't know which path was right, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let this define me. The divorce process was messy and painful, as expected, but I stayed firm. Lisa tried to reach out a few times, sending long messages about how much she missed me and how she would do anything to make things right. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Months later, I found myself sitting in the same diner where I had first processed the betrayal. This time, though, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I wasn't healed, not entirely, but I was no longer drowning. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about the lessons I'd learned. About trust, about love, and about resilience. Lisa had shattered my world, but she hadn't destroyed me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Thank you for following this story to the end. If you're going through something similar, know this: it's okay to walk away from what no longer serves you. It's okay to demand better for yourself. And it's okay to take your time finding your way forward. You deserve peace.